Across the world, beneath headlines, beyond tourist photos, and outside the view of most Americans, entire nations are crumbling, not because of war alone, but because of something far more unsettling: internal collapse. Governments are falling apart, currencies are becoming worthless, and in some of the most surprising places, people are waking up to empty store shelves, vanishing jobs, no electricity, and no future. We're not talking about war zones or failed states. We're talking about modern nations, with cities, banks, schools, that are now barely holding on. And make no mistake, this is more than a list. It's a warning, because what's happening in these countries could happen anywhere when things go just slightly off track. Stay with us until the end, because number 3 is a collapse few saw coming, and it could signal something much bigger for the rest of the world. And before we begin, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We cover the stories most people ignore, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. All right, let's begin. Number 10, Sri Lanka. Just a few years ago, Sri Lanka was known as a tropical paradise. White sand beaches, bustling tourism, and a rising economy. But today, it's a textbook case of national collapse. In 2022, Sri Lanka defaulted on its debt for the first time in its history. Why? A perfect storm of reckless borrowing, a tourism sector crushed by COVID, and one of the worst agricultural policies ever implemented. In an overnight decision, the government banned all chemical fertilizers, killing nearly half of the nation's crop output and forcing them to import food they could no longer afford. By mid-2022, inflation had exploded past 70%. The national currency lost 80% of its value, and basic goods like milk and rice were out of reach for most families. Hospitals ran out of medicine, schools closed due to fuel shortages, protesters stormed the presidential palace, and the president literally fled the country. Today, Sri Lanka survives on a $2.9 billion bailout from the IMF, but nearly half the population is struggling to afford food, and foreign investors are gone. It wasn't just a collapse, it was avoidable. And that's what makes it terrifying. Number 9, Pakistan. Pakistan is a nation of over 240 million people, home to one of the largest armies in the world, and a country with nuclear weapons. And right now, it's hanging by a thread. In 2023, inflation hit a 50-year high, pushing food and fuel beyond the reach of millions. The Pakistani rupee lost over half its value in less than a year. Power outages lasted 12 hours a day. In cities, even longer in rural areas. But the collapse isn't just economic, it's political. Former Prime Minister Imran Khan was arrested, released, re-arrested, sparking nationwide protests. The military, long seen as the power behind the scenes, has lost the public's trust. And that's dangerous, in a country that's never had a truly stable democracy. Pakistan barely avoided default with an emergency IMF loan, but its foreign reserves dipped below $4 billion, barely enough to pay for 1 month of imports. And here's what makes it especially scary. Nuclear weapons don't stop an economic meltdown. If Pakistan spirals any further, the consequences won't just affect South Asia. They'll be felt across the globe. Number 8, Lebanon. Once known as the Paris of the Middle East, Lebanon has collapsed into one of the worst economic disasters in modern history. In just a few short years, the Lebanese pound lost over 98% of its value. People's life savings vanished overnight. Banks froze accounts. And even today, you still can't access your own money without government permission. The middle class? Gone. Electricity runs for just a few hours per day. Hospitals are closing. Pharmacies are empty. Fuel lines stretch for miles. And basic food costs have surged by more than 400%. The trigger? Years of corruption, sectarian politics, and economic mismanagement, topped off by one of the largest non-nuclear explosions in history at the Beirut port in 2020, which destroyed much of the capital. Today, the Lebanese government is practically non-functional. Citizens rely on cash, black markets, or foreign remittances to survive. And what's most haunting? This collapse happened without war. It came from within, and that's what should scare everyone. Number 7. Haiti. Haiti has been in crisis for decades, but today, the country isn't just struggling, it's collapsing in real time. Since the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse in 2021, Haiti has had no functioning government. No elections, no parliament, no president. What fills the void? Gangs. Over 60% of Haiti's capital, Port-au-Prince, is now controlled by heavily armed criminal groups. These gangs run checkpoints, collect taxes, kidnap for ransom, and wage open warfare in the streets. The police are outgunned, the military is ineffective, and the average Haitian has no access to clean water, electricity, or basic safety. More than 5 million people need humanitarian aid, but even foreign workers are pulling out because it's simply too dangerous. This is what collapse looks like when the state completely disappears. And right now, there is no clear path out. Number 6. Venezuela. It wasn't long ago that Venezuela was one of the richest countries in Latin America, backed by the largest proven oil reserves in the world. Now, it's a cautionary tale of what happens when hyperinflation, authoritarian rule, and economic collapse collide. At its worst, inflation in Venezuela hit over 10 million%. Yes, you heard that right. People carried stacks of worthless cash to buy bread. Hospitals ran without medicine. Electricity failed. And over 7 million Venezuelans fled the country, one of the largest migrations in recent history. President Nicolas Maduro still clings to power, despite widespread allegations of election fraud, torture, and political imprisonment. And while inflation has technically slowed in recent years, the damage is done. The currency has collapsed. Oil production is a fraction of what it used to be. And the people who could fix the country already left. What's left is a shell of a nation and a population living in survival mode. Number 5. Myanmar. In early 2021, Myanmar's fragile democracy collapsed overnight. The military staged a coup, arrested its elected leaders, and took full control of the country, igniting one of the fastest descents into chaos in modern history. What followed has been nothing short of a civil war. More than 3,000 civilians have been killed, over 20,000 political prisoners remain locked up, and entire villages have been burned to the ground in military airstrikes. The economy? In free fall. Sanctions, investor flight, and internal conflict have brought industries to a halt. Poverty has doubled, food insecurity is rising, and the banking system barely functions. Foreign companies have fled. Tourism is dead. And Myanmar's currency, the kyat, has lost enormous value. But perhaps the most dangerous part? The conflict is growing more complex by the day. Armed rebel groups and civilian militias now control large parts of the country, launching guerrilla attacks against the military regime. Myanmar isn't just a failed democracy. It's a country stuck in a prolonged, bloody implosion with no end in sight. Number 4. Sudan. In 2023, Sudan plunged into a devastating civil war between two rival generals, turning cities into battlefields and sending millions fleeing for their lives. The Sudanese armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces, once allies, are now fighting for total control. What began as a power struggle has evolved into one of the worst humanitarian crises on the planet. Entire families are fleeing on foot. Hospitals have been bombed. Electricity and water supplies are cut off, and over 7 million people are displaced, with another 1.5 million escaping the country entirely. This all comes after a brief moment of hope. In 2019, Sudan's longtime dictator Omar al-Bashir was overthrown, and the world hoped democracy might take root. Instead, the military seized control again, and now Sudan is ripping itself apart. Famine is looming, war crimes are being reported, and with no international peacekeepers, the violence is spreading unchecked. For the people of Sudan, this isn't just a crisis, it's the collapse of a nation. Number 3. Argentina. Now here's the one that most people won't expect. Argentina, once one of the richest countries in the world, is now on the brink of total economic collapse. Inflation in Argentina has soared to over 100%, one of the highest rates on Earth. The national currency, the peso, is collapsing, poverty is rising, and more than 40% of the population is now living below the poverty line. Grocery prices double every few months. The middle class is vanishing, and the country has already defaulted on its debt 9 times. In 2023, Argentina's central bank ran out of US dollars. Imports slowed, fuel shortages hit, and angry citizens took to the streets demanding answers from a government that has no real control over the economy anymore. What's shocking is that Argentina wasn't destroyed by war or dictatorship, but by decades of bad economic policy, corruption, and mismanagement. If it can happen there, it can happen anywhere. Number 2, Afghanistan. In 2021, after 2 decades of war and nation building, the U.S. pulled out of Afghanistan. What followed was one of the fastest and most dramatic collapses in modern political history. The Taliban swept back into power in just 11 days. Billions of dollars in foreign aid disappeared almost overnight, banks froze, cash vanished, and the country plunged into an economic freefall. Nearly 75% of the government's operating budget had come from international donors, all of whom withdrew support after the Taliban takeover. The result? Inflation soared. Food prices spiked. Millions fell into poverty. Women and girls were barred from education and work. And more than half the population now lives in extreme hunger. International sanctions, isolation, and Taliban misrule have turned Afghanistan into a humanitarian disaster, and the world has largely moved on. But the people of Afghanistan haven't. For them, the collapse continues every single day. Number 1, Ukraine. No country on Earth has experienced a more violent and immediate unraveling than Ukraine. In 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion, plunging Ukraine into a war that has now killed tens of thousands, displaced millions, and left entire cities in ruins. The economy shrank by more than 30% in a single year. Infrastructure, from power grids to schools to roads, has been destroyed across large parts of the country. Ukraine was already struggling before the war with corruption, political instability, and a fragile economy. But now, even with billions in Western military aid, it's fighting for survival on every level. The cost of rebuilding is estimated at hundreds of billions of dollars, money Ukraine doesn't have. And while the international community stands behind it for now, there's no telling how long that support will last, or what will be left of the country by the time the war ends. This isn't just a conflict, it's a national collapse in slow motion, with global consequences. What do these collapses all have in common? It wasn't just war, it wasn't just bad luck. It was corruption, mismanagement, weak institutions, and leaders who ignored the warning signs until it was too late. And that's the real message here. No country is too strong to fall apart. Not Sri Lanka, not Argentina, not even the nuclear-armed nations on this list. Collapse doesn't always come with an explosion. Sometimes it comes quietly, over years, until suddenly everything is gone. So what do you think? Which country on this list shocked you the most? And which one do you think could be next? Drop a comment below, hit that like button, and subscribe for more videos that uncover what the headlines don't show. Thanks for watching, and stay aware.